So thank you everybody for joining the Kent County Health Department staff and Kent Intermediate School District. My name is Ron Helm. I'm one of the Ed Tech consultants. I'm just going to try to help moderate on the background. You probably won't see me after this for a little bit. I'll hide myself, but you may hear my voice. So again, I'll post in the chat a few times if you want to keep up with that. You'll see some questions and Q&As in there. Again, if you are not speaking, please leave your microphone muted. We will have time for questions and answers near the end of the presentations that we have from a couple of folks here. So without further ado, turn it over to Joann Hoganson. Joann.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joann Hoganson, and I'm a nurse at Kent County Health Department. And during this COVID pandemic, I have the unique privilege of being the liaison between the health department and the schools, all the schools K through 12, pre-K through 12 in Kent County. And so I've been working very closely with, it was Ron Kniff and now Ron Kaler, and all of the superintendents of the private schools and the public schools, the charter schools, all of the schools in Kent County. And I'll have to tell you, it's been quite an educational experience for me. I understand the schools of Kent County better than I ever have before. But one of the things that I became aware of is that as we now are able to provide vaccine to many of the personnel within the schools, teachers and parapros, administrators and bus drivers and people that work in the kitchen and all the different staff that are associated with the schools, that many of you have questions. And they're very legitimate questions. This is a time like we have never experienced before. And we want to give you an opportunity to get the information that you all need to make a wise choice for yourself. And so the purpose of our meeting today is not to pressure you to do something you don't want to do. The purpose of our meeting today is to provide you with the best information that we have, and both from a medical standpoint, a scientific standpoint, as far as a public health standpoint of what's best for our community. We will be learning together, and then it will be your choice to make the decision that you want to make to determine what's best for you, and then probably secondarily for your family. So I'm going to begin by introducing our two panelists. We have Dr. Karla Black here today. Karla works with me at the health department. She works in the area of emergency preparedness. She's our emergency preparedness coordinator, but her background is as a scientist and particularly in the study of viruses. So she is uniquely qualified to give us some of the background about the novel coronavirus. And then we also have with us Dr. Nirali Bora. Dr. Bora is a medical doctor. She is our county's medical director for our public health. And Dr. Bora is going to be addressing some of our medical questions, and then answering any questions that you have for us as the public health department. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Black to present to us some information that she's prepared about coronavirus.
Thank you, everyone. Really happy to be here today. Thanks for that great introduction, Joann. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the science of mRNA vaccines. And so those are the current vaccines that we are using right now. So I know not all of you are probably science teachers, and so we're going to kind of start off with a quick science lesson. And so hopefully that we can kind of level set where everyone is, and we can talk about the science piece of the vaccine. So you probably have heard plenty about vaccines, and my slides won't advance unless I hit the button down here, apparently. So how some of other vaccines work. You know, we've had vaccines for years and years, and so some of the vaccine technologies we've had in the past, the first one I'm going to call is what we call a live attenuated virus, which basically is just a weakened form of the virus that is injected into you, and you get an actual infection with that vaccine. So some of the vaccines that you might be familiar with that includes measles, mumps, rubella, rotavirus, smallpox, chickenpox. And as Joann said, my background is in virology. I used to work on yellow fever, and so the yellow fever vaccine, of course, one of my favorites is a live attenuated virus vaccine. The other type of viral vaccines that are currently out there that you might have heard of before is what we call an inactivated virus. So we kill the virus with heat or chemicals, and when that's injected into you, it's not an infection. It's just like the pieces and parts of the virus that are injected into you, and it doesn't actually infect your cells or anything like that, but your immune system still reacts to it. So some examples of those types of vaccines include hepatitis A, the flu shot, polio shot, and rabies. And so we're going to start kind of level setting with Biology 101 next. So I just want to start off with some of the vaccines that you're already familiar with, and now moving into, okay, what's an mRNA vaccine and how is this different from what we've seen before in other vaccines? So Biology 101, molecules. DNA, it's the blueprint of you. It's the thing that's inside your cell that says, okay, Karla Black, you have, brown hair, blue eyes, and all that. And so you might have heard of this as the double helix. And so this is your genome. This is what develops you. And so keep in mind that this is a double helix, and we'll see why that's important here in a few minutes. But you might have also seen maybe sometime in your science career, maybe in school, that you see something like this. These are all your chromosomes. So all your chromosomes, again, that's your blueprint. And amazingly enough, all the pieces and parts that are you are right here in all of these different pieces of DNA. So the next piece of molecules that we need to be concerned about is RNA. So whereas DNA is the blueprint, you can't have all the pieces and parts of you showing up at once, because amazingly enough, there's so many different pieces of you. Like if you think of how you looked and how you were physically at 4 years old versus now 40 or whatever age you might be, you're completely different, right? So sometimes we have to only take pieces and parts of the blueprint and start utilizing just those minor pieces. And so that's where we get into RNA. And RNA is different also because it's a single helix. It's not that double helix that we hear a lot about with DNA. And actually, you have to make RNA from DNA. So as you can see in the picture right here, you have a piece of DNA that's unwinding, and you have the single helix of RNA coming off of it. So they're not the same molecule. The RNA is made from the DNA. And the one last molecule I want you to be familiar with as we kind of go into our journey of mRNA vaccines are proteins. And so what we have now is we have an RNA, and then we're going to make proteins from that RNA. And the proteins are the doers, really. I mean, so you have the DNA and RNA, they're the message and everything like that, but you need molecules to actually do all the pieces of you. And so they look very different compared to the DNA and the RNA. So here's a picture of a molecule protein I used to work on. And so this is a yellow fever protein. So I'm slightly biased on picking this protein. But as you can see, there's lots of helices and other things all over the place. So they're completely different. And basically, a protein's function is determined by how it looks. And so here's another picture of another protein. So as you can see, completely different. So these are the molecules that we need to be concerned about with our Biology 101. So the central dogma of biology is basically DNA goes to RNA, and then the RNA is the template for the proteins. And so I know one of the big concerns about this mRNA vaccine is that the RNA is going to get integrated into your DNA. And we'll show you exactly how that really isn't able to happen. But in general, for humans, RNA doesn't get integrated into DNA because, as we saw in the last slide, DNA is actually a double helix, RNA is just a single helix. So we'll talk a little bit about more how that doesn't happen, but I just want to kind of give you that general idea of what's happening. So where is all the stuff happening in the cell? So this is my really roughly drawn cell. There's a reason why I went into science. and not into art. So the two main parts of the cell that we're going to look at are the nucleus and the cytoplasm. So let's take a look what's going on in each of these areas. So in the nucleus, that's where your DNA is. It only stays in that nucleus. It's not going out into your cytoplasm. It's just hanging out there. And so when the DNA is in your nucleus, then it's going to make the RNA. And then once the RNA is made, so we have that certain message that's saying, hey, I need to make this protein. It goes out into the cytoplasm and it says, okay, hey, rest of cell, find some proteins that will help me make this specific protein that this RNA makes. So it goes to protein. But one of the really important things, though, too, is that the RNA just doesn't stay in your cell and hang out forever. It actually will degrade. And most RNAs only are stable in your cells for maybe hours to a couple days. So it's not like if you have RNA in your cells, kind of like what we're going to be talking about with the vaccine, the RNA isn't going to stay in your cells forever. It's just going to be in there for probably maybe up to a couple days. So let's talk about coronaviruses because that's exactly why we're here. So with coronaviruses, this is a picture of COVID-19. They are what we call an RNA virus. And so there is no DNA step to how they're made or anything like that. So there's no DNA involved in this whatsoever. And viruses are they're really good parasites, honestly. If they don't infect a human, they really can't do much of anything. Like they need a lot of help. And so that's why there's kind of two different types of groups of proteins that are involved with coronaviruses. So a coronavirus needs 29 total proteins that it's able to make from its genome. So there's structural proteins, which are those that what you're seeing up on your screen right now. There's the M protein, which is called the membrane protein, the N protein, which is inside, and then we have the envelope, what's on the outside. But then also what's really important is that spike protein. So these like trumpet-shaped proteins on the outside of the virus. So all of these proteins make up the virus itself. They also need these non-structural proteins too to help it actually replicate within the cells because, like I said, viruses are really terrible unless they have a lot of help. I mean, they really can't do much of anything. So they're basically going to hijack the machinery that your own cells have along with some of the proteins that it brings. And we'll see how that works in just a minute. So here's my really poorly drawn cell again. So we have an infection of our virus. And so what it makes is this little RNA molecule. So like I said, there's no DNA involved. It's all RNA. So you can kind of think of this as, just only the RNA, just the genome. And so once you have that genome in your cells during an infection, basically the cell has its own proteins that it's making all the time. And it's like, hey, I have there's this mRNA over there and I need to go and make a protein off of it. So what it does is it goes and it reads that RNA and then it says, oh, so I'm going to make now these viral proteins. So now that it's made viral proteins, then the viral proteins are going to read that RNA again and start making more and more RNA, which we know, based on what I said before, we don't make RNA out in the cytoplasm of the cell. We only make it in the nucleus. So this is specific to the virus itself. And so now that you have all of these viral proteins in red and all the RNAs in red from the virus, then it's going to start making all sorts of new virus. And then once it makes a whole bunch of new virus, it's going to leave the cell and start infecting other cells. So that's kind of in general how the coronavirus works. Basically, it's going to hijack your machinery and say, hey, I need to make more of my viral RNA and make more virus. It's just honestly a really good parasite or a machine, if you want to look at it that way. So let's look at how an mRNA vaccine works and how this all relates to all the science that really honestly makes a lot of sense. So in terms of the mRNA vaccine, it's not a full virus. So I have a little picture up here on the screen. It's basically a bunch of little lipid blobs, basically just fat tissue. Sorry, I saw the word tissue when I looked over at my notes. So there's no fetal tissue. It's basically just little blobs of fat. And that's through polyethylene glycol, cholesterol, and some other molecules. But really, it's just a thing of lipid, a little thing of fat, because honestly, the outer part of your cells is basically lipids. And so it just kind of sticks to it. So there's no fetal tissue in this whatsoever. And then the little red blob in the middle, that's the mRNA that's been programmed. And so what are we going to do with an mRNA vaccine? So in this case, instead of having an actual infection, the lipid particle will be attracted to the cells and it'll then release the RNA that it's coding for. But in this case, with the mRNA vaccine, we're not making all those 29 proteins that we talked about for coronavirus. We're only making just one protein, and that's just the structural protein, that little trumpet that we looked at in the previous slide. So basically, again, now we've released that RNA that's been programmed with just that one part of the spike protein. Our proteins that are in the cytoplasm recognize that RNA, say, hey, I got to make some proteins off of this. And so now it's only going to make those nice little spike proteins. So there's no non-structural proteins, so therefore there's no more RNA being made, and so therefore there's no virus being made either. So now it's just making that one little spike. And so our cells are really, really cool, honestly. They chop up proteins all the time, and then they send them over to the external part of the cell. And why they do this is basically your body is always checking for invaders. And so they chop up proteins and send up little pieces of these proteins to the tops of your cells and say, hey, immune system, come check this out. Come look at what I have here. And so because the immune system's like, hey, hold on, this isn't mine. It says, uh-oh, I have an infection. I have something that's not mine here. And so that triggers the immune system to start making antibodies against this piece of protein that's on the external part of the cell. And so, again, it's a really neat system because it's basically already utilizing the biology that you already have in you instead of having to actually inject a full virus into you or anything, or a virus that's being killed. It's just one tiny piece of a protein that is on the virus. It's not the entire virus, and it can't replicate in your cells. And also, again, because we talked about how the RNA isn't stable forever, that RNA is going to go away. So within probably a day or two, that RNA will just degrade, and you won't have that RNA in you anymore. And so no more spike proteins will be made, and so that's the end of the vaccine piece. So it actually makes a lot of biological sense of what's going on with these mRNA vaccines. And of course, safety is a huge priority when it comes to vaccines. I mean, it's absolutely the number one priority with any vaccine. And so I know it seems like the vaccine moved along really quickly when we came from learning about COVID at the very, very end of 2019 to a vaccine that was approved almost nearly a year later. So all vaccines start off kind of with this basic research that's going on. And mRNA vaccines didn't just come up now in the last year. They were actually started many, many years ago. They were looking at utilizing mRNA vaccine technology back during SARS. So I think that was like 2002, actually. And so they started working on the mRNA for SARS way back then, but because SARS just kind of died out, they kind of stopped with that technology. But RNA research has been going on for quite a while. And so the other big piece of why this can move so fast is, so I used to make RNA in the lab every day. This is not really a lot of effort. I mean, if you give me the right stuff, I can get your RNA in about a couple hours, honestly. And so instead of having to, put virus into chicken eggs and to other things, this is a lot easier process. And honestly, this is really neat because this brought the scientists of the world together. I mean, so they really focused on getting a vaccine in place for COVID-19. And so it's amazing when you have the smartest people in the world trying to get to one end goal. It's amazing how quickly things can come along. So when we do vaccine development and approval, they go through various stages. So we start off with phase 1, which is just kind of that basic research and discovery, and then starting some preclinical studies that are just doing like studies within cells. But then once they say, okay, we have something that we think will work, they start to do the clinical studies, and that's where you hear phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So phase 1 specifically looking at safety, whereas phase 2 is effectiveness, and then phase 3 is combining the two, and we start moving forward. So then once all the data is in, the FDA reviews it, ACIP at CDC then reviews that review as well, and then we move into actually putting shots into arms once everything is approved. And currently you might hear the term emergency use authorization, and that's because it has gone through all these stages, but because of the pandemic, things moved a little bit quicker, and so they wanted to be able to use this and get shots into arms so we can hopefully stop the pandemic. So safety is always the #1 priority of vaccine. And even now, as after people are getting vaccine, they're still monitoring for any sort of side effects. So just a couple quick FAQs, myths, and rumors. Is the vaccine a live virus? Nope, it is only mRNA and those little blobs of fat on the outside. Other vaccines we have been using for years are live virus, but this is not. Will the viral RNA in the vaccine integrate into my DNA? Nope. We have basically the RNA is a single strand of a molecule, whereas DNA is a double strand, so that doesn't really work. And then also the mRNA that's coming in from the vaccine is in the cytoplasm, whereas your DNA is in the nucleus. And so they're in totally different locations of the cell. And then also the last one I've heard quite a bit, is there a microchip in the vaccine? No, there isn't. and so I just want to let everyone know that based on the science, this makes a lot of sense, and it makes a lot of sense as to why they are so effective. So with that, I am done with my presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Joann.
Thank you very much, Dr. Black. And now we're going to turn over to Dr. Nirali Bora, the Medical Director at the Kent County Health Department.
All right, give me just a minute to make sure it's working here. All right, can you all see my slides all right? And can you hear me?
Nope, we don't have your slides.
You don't have my slides.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
There we go. It'll be just a second for it to load. Okay. You're all set now.
All right. So thank you, Joann, and thank you, Dr. Black. So as Karla mentioned, this is a very effective vaccine and a really unique way of getting vaccine into people, just a unique strategy that is very exciting for science in general. So these vaccines, the two that are in the market right now, there is Pfizer and Moderna, as you've heard, they are incredibly effective. So Pfizer, after 2 doses, is 95% effective in preventing symptomatic COVID, and Moderna is 94.1% effective. Compare this to the typical flu vaccine. So the typical flu vaccine is about 40 to 60% effective in preventing the flu. And with that effectiveness of the flu, people who get vaccinated are much less likely to get the flu, and it really helps decrease flu in the community. So you can really get a sense that if enough people are vaccinated, we will make a significant impact on COVID-19 in the community. And I also want to emphasize that this effectiveness is based on decreasing symptomatic COVID. What we don't know yet is how effective are these vaccines in preventing someone from getting asymptomatic infection. So a lot of people with COVID never develop symptoms, but they can still transmit this to other people. And so until we get more data showing that these vaccines prevent that, we unfortunately do have to maintain all the standard precautions even after someone gets vaccinated. So this is wearing the mask, keeping distance, washing your hands. Hopefully we'll get data soon that shows that we may not have to continue all that, but for now we do. So after getting vaccinated, what to expect? So I'm sure that some of you have already been vaccinated and can speak to this quite well, but about 80 to 90% of people develop one local symptom. So this could be redness, pain, swelling at the site. 55 to 83% develop one systemic symptom. So this could be headaches, which is pretty common, fever, chills. You can get body aches, joint aches, fatigue. Usually these go away in about 1 to 3 days. So anaphylaxis, or a really severe allergic reaction, is actually quite rare. So looking at some data from the CDC from mid-January, they looked at the doses that have been given already. They found that anaphylaxis happened about 5 times in a million doses administered for Pfizer and about 2.8 times in a million doses administered. So incredibly rare. And all the sites that do have vaccinations, they do have medications available to help people in case they do develop anaphylaxis at the site. So this is a question we get a lot. If I had COVID and I recovered, do I still need the vaccine? So the answer is yes. If you have COVID and are still in your infectious period, please don't go to a vaccination site. We want to protect all the people working there. But after those 10 days have passed and you're no longer infectious, we do recommend that you get the COVID vaccine when you're eligible. And this is because we don't know from natural infection how long someone has immunity from COVID. And we don't know how long that lasts, and we don't know if they truly have it. So we expect that most people will have some level of immunity for about 3 months after that, but we're still not sure. So for that reason, yes, please go ahead and get the vaccine when you can. So if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, there's some things to think about. So for pregnancy, we know that people who are pregnant have a higher risk of becoming very ill if they do develop COVID. These studies, like pretty much most scientific studies initially, they limit their enrollment of pregnant people just because of safety concerns, even though the mechanism by which this vaccine works does not pose a risk to the pregnant person or to the fetus. We just don't have a lot of data in humans. From the animal studies that were done, there were no safety concerns that were seen. The American College of OBGYN does recommend that people who are pregnant consider getting vaccinated once they are eligible. There are many healthcare workers who have been pregnant who have chosen to be vaccinated. This is always something you can discuss with your primary care provider, with your OBGYN to see what their opinions are as well, and discuss this further. So same thing with breastfeeding. If you're breastfeeding, there really is no data on these vaccines in the breastfed infant or milk production. However, again, just based on what Dr. Black reviewed on how this vaccine works, there's really no clear biological way that it would be a risk to the breastfeeding infant. So at this point, the American College of OBGYN is also saying that women who are breastfeeding can be vaccinated, but again, you can always discuss with your physician. And actually, for those who are considering becoming pregnant, the American College of OBGYN also does say that this vaccine can be safely given in those populations. And people who were in these studies for both Moderna and Pfizer did become pregnant. There's a concern about fertility, but that has not been proven, and there's no mechanism by which from which these vaccines work that we can biologically say how that would happen. So these are some other questions we get a lot. And if you have an autoimmune condition, these folks can get the COVID-19 vaccine. Again, like a lot of what I'm going to say, there is limited data. One, theoretical concern I've heard is that if you have an autoimmune disease and receive this vaccine, if it amps up your immune system, could your symptoms worsen? So when they looked at people who have autoimmune diseases in these study trials, they did not see worsening of symptoms in people who received the vaccine and those who received the placebo. For those who are immunocompromised, so for these people, we know that they are at higher risk of severe illness because of COVID. So similar thing, we don't have great data, but there's a theoretical concern that the vaccine could be less effective because they may not be able to mount the same immune response as someone whose immune system is more fully functioning. So for these people, it is especially important to stay vigilant after getting the vaccine, to make sure to wear the mask and wash the hands and keep your distance. At this point, we feel that the benefits outweigh the risks in both of these groups of people to receive the vaccine. So who should not get the vaccine? So this is directly from the CDC site. So there are very few contraindications to receiving the vaccine. The main one is if you have a severe allergic reaction after the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, the mRNA vaccine, or any of its components, don't get the second one. If you have an immediate allergic reaction, so this is within 4 hours of getting the vaccine, if this is any kind of reaction within the first 4 hours of any of the components of the vaccine, which are very minimal, there are very few components in this, then it's recommended that you see an allergist before getting your second dose. If you have an immediate allergic reaction to polysorbate, this can cross-react with the polyethylene glycol, this sensitivity. So again, it's recommended that you see an allergist. If you receive any vaccine, flu vaccine, shingles vaccine, anything else, you need to wait 2 weeks before receiving a COVID vaccine. And same thing, after you receive the COVID vaccine, you need to wait another 2 weeks to receive any other vaccine. This is just because there aren't enough studies done to know how the two vaccines will interact, how your immune system will respond with two vaccines. If someone has COVID and they receive antibodies as a part of their treatment, they need to wait 90 days after that treatment to get the COVID vaccine. So this is a timeline from the state health department on the COVID-19 vaccination timeline. I'm sure you've heard quite a bit about this already, but we are currently vaccinating healthcare workers, long-term care residents and staff, people who are 65 and older, school and childcare staff, correction staff, and first responders. So you can see in this, in this timeline that other essential workers will need to wait quite a while until there will be enough vaccine to be able to vaccinate that population. As you know, there is still very limited vaccine that's available. There are still people in the very first phase who have not been able to receive the vaccine. There are people in their 90s who have not yet been able to receive the vaccine. And so it's going to take a while for us to catch up and make sure that everyone who's been eligible will have access to the vaccine. We're also really trying to think through how can we make sure that people who don't have access to computers, have issues with mobility and other concerns, how can we make sure that we're trying to get access to those people as well, while we're trying to be speedily working towards getting as many people vaccinated as possible. So this is a dashboard that shows how many vaccines have been administered in Kent County. So in the top bar graph there, you can see that the light blue box shows how many people have been vaccinated per day in the county. The darker blue on top is the number of second doses that have been administered. So you can see our pace has been gradually picking up and has been consistent, at least over the past week, with the amount of vaccine that we have received here. The bottom two gauges show how many vaccines. So the one on the left is the first dose. That shows how many first doses have been administered. The little, the 351K, that shows 70% of the adults. Once we have reached that, we'll have vaccinated 70% of the adults in Kent County. That could approximate herd immunity depending on where things are at that point. So we vaccinated about 10% of the adult population in Kent County. We have a lot more to go to get that second dose still. So what are the variants? So I'm sure you've heard about the variants. This map is actually a few days old by now, but the variants are concerning because the variants are different in how transmissible they are in person to person, potentially how severe the infection can be, and how they affect the immune response. A variant is when a virus has developed enough mutations to be distinct from the original virus. It's still the same virus, but it's now a little bit different. So the three main recent variants that you may have heard about are the B117 that's originated in the UK. There's one from South Africa and one from Brazil. There are also new variants that are I'm sure there are many variants out there that we just don't know about. As a virus replicates, it's very common for all viruses to change and have mutations. So this really shows that we need to be as quick as possible as we can in vaccinating people, and we need to be vigilant in maintaining all the protections that we're currently doing. The UK variant is 50 to 70% more contagious and has been identified throughout the state of Michigan. And so I know I've said this a million times and I won't keep saying it after you get vaccinated, but just be careful, continue doing the same things you're doing. And we really tell other people about your vaccine experience. I think hearing from you, you are going to be the best advocates that we have to tell people how the vaccine experience is. We don't want anyone to feel that they're forced to get the vaccine, but we want them to understand what the experience is like. So the more that you can share, the more that we would really appreciate that. So thank you for your time, and we'll be happy to answer questions when that time comes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bora. And now we're going to be addressing some questions, some which came to us in writing earlier and some which are being written into the chat box now. And I'm going to ask our Ron from KCHD, who's going to be reading out the questions.
Yep, so we'll go ahead in those questions, and I've been sharing the link in our little system here. So let me share my screen real quick and we'll just bring the ones up that are like the most asked questions. And so we'll do the first one here. After the vaccine takes full effect, does it keep you from spreading COVID or can you spread it unknowingly?
So you can spread it unknowingly. We still don't know yet. So hopefully we'll hear more information soon about that. But at this point, since we don't know that for sure, we have to assume that we are able to spread it.
Okay, next one up. Do we know yet how long the vaccine is good for? Will this be an annual injection similar to the flu vaccine?
Karla, feel free to jump in. We don't know yet. What I've heard is 6 months at least. We're hoping it's longer than that. It could become an annual vaccine like the flu. We just don't have that information.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely. Just because, like Dr. Bora was saying, with the different variants, those that are producing the mRNA vaccine, so Pfizer, Moderna, can make edits to the RNA that they are using pretty, I'm going to say, relatively easily. And so therefore it could be a lot like the flu vaccine in that they are always looking at the new variant for the year.
Okay, and the next one is, I have unfortunately already tested positive for COVID. I have hence recovered. What significant benefit does the vaccine offer that natural immunity does not?
I think we don't know, depending on how severe your symptoms were or what it was like when you were first exposed. We don't know how long the natural immunity lasts. And so the benefit is this would be like a booster dose for you. This would give you your immune system another chance to mount an immune response and to remember this vaccine for sure. So I think it helps us recognize how long, at least we'll have better data on how long you would be protected.
Okay, next one. Do we have any longitudinal data for other mRNA vaccines?
We don't, because these are the first mRNA vaccines that are being used.
And mRNA again, it's a new application of an old technology, correct? Used in cancer treatment. Potential long-term effects not seen yet in studies. Would love to hear more about this.
So I think based on what Dr. Black was saying, the mRNA does not last long. And so the effect is not long-lived. The hope is that the memory is what happens from the immune system. Once the immune system sees the protein and makes that memory of that, and that's what the body holds on to, not the actual mRNA. So I can't think of a biological way why you would have long-term effects. Not that I can say that there aren't, but we don't know that.
Okay, next one. I've heard after the second dose, some people have fever, headaches, and other symptoms. Do we take any regular medication to alleviate the symptoms?
You can take Tylenol or ibuprofen. We would not recommend taking those ahead of time because there's potential that they could decrease the immune response. But afterwards, if you need them, feel free to use them.
Okay, next one we had upvoted was, you mentioned there's a concern about fertility, but there is not a clear biological connection for how that would be. Can you elaborate on the concern?
Sure, there's not actually a concern. It's a myth that's been perpetuated online. So we've had a lot of questions about it, but there is no concern from the medical community about fertility.
Okay, next one. For pregnant women, can mRNA vaccines cross the placenta and impact a baby's development?
So Dr. Black, feel free to answer this one as well. I don't think that the vaccine itself would cross into the placenta. The antibodies certainly could. And we're seeing that women, just from women who've been infected with COVID throughout pregnancy, that we're seeing that some newborns have been found to have antibodies already for COVID, which actually could be protective for them. I can't answer for sure on the mRNA vaccine itself crossing the placenta, but it's directly injected into the muscle cells. So I don't see how that would happen, but I can't say that for sure. Dr. Black, do you have more thoughts on that?
I would agree with what you said. Overall, I don't see how that would necessarily happen, but certainly the antibodies could cross the placenta.
Okay, next one is, I am part of a home community program and make home visits. Can you tell me when we might be able to make in-person visits with the families that we serve?
I would think that's a decision that's made by the community program based on the positivity in the area and what protection is available for the person making the visits.
Joanne, did you have some
Yeah, I was
advice there
just going
too?
to say, uh, in my normal role at Kent County Health Department, I'm also the Director of Community Wellness, and many of our staff do home visits. And right now, all of our home visits are being done virtually. We are not sending nurses or social workers or community health workers into people's homes except under extremely rare circumstances. So we're waiting until we have a better sense of security that is the right thing to do. And right now we are relying on virtual telehealth to accomplish the same thing.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Is there a waiting period after having COVID before you can get the vaccine?
You need to wait at least 10 days. You need to wait until your infectious period is done and your symptoms are improving. After that, no, there's no time limit. You are protected somewhat with immunity for the next 90 days. And so if you wanted to wait a little bit longer, that would be fine, but you don't have to wait.
I need to schedule a vaccination. How? What's the best place right now?
So overall, I would say to go to vaccinatewestmi.com, and there's a location on there for you to register. So you can look on there, and there are a number of places that are offering vaccines right now. Oh, thank you, Ron. So if you go to vaccine distribution up on the right-hand side, there you go, and you scroll down a bit. Yep, there you go. Hit vaccine registration. And if you go down, you can see all the different health departments. So, you know, depending on where you live, where you work, there's a number of different options that you can link to in here. And so if you wanted to be vaccinated at DeVos Place, at our regional location, you can click on learn how to schedule your COVID-19 vaccination, and it'll take you through the process. So starting with registration, and from there, I mean, it'll start asking you questions. And basically, this just starts you going through the process of entering your information. It will not schedule you an appointment right now. I don't believe really any of those links right now will say, okay, you have an appointment at this time. It's collecting data to see, you know, are you currently within the current phases? Again, same thing as what you see here on the Kent County Health Department's page, very similar. And so we're collecting that information to ensure that people are in the proper phases that we are in, and then you will get a phone call to schedule your time once you're able to be a part of that. And we have enough vaccine, because that's really the limiting factor at this point, is that we just don't have enough vaccine for everyone at this point. So we just ask that people be patient, but we absolutely want you to start that registration process so that we know you're there. And also, say one thing, with the schools, and Joann might want to jump in on this, the schools were allocated out to the various hospital systems. So in theory, you might be getting a phone call from whatever hospital your school was assigned to as well. So, I mean, the registration process is really good for your friends, your family. Make sure to share that. But if you are employed by a school, then your school has already been allocated to a hospital system. And maybe Joann might want to jump in on that too.
Yes, and all the different schools were allocated either to Spectrum, to St. Mary's Mercy Health, or to Metro. And one thing that we do ask is don't sign up in multiple places. If you are registered or have an appointment in one place, don't look for another appointment someplace else. That just complicates our system. And it is really kind of challenging to go in and cancel appointments. So it is better just to make the one appointment that you need and wait for that time to come.
Just because I have you and I can ask this question, with regard to the Kent County Health Department, I've talked to a few colleagues of mine that wondered, is the health department going to roll up their distribution or vaccine distribution at the health department into the DeVos Place once they're done with all the people that need to get a second vaccination?
My understanding is that we intend to maintain our vaccination clinic here at 700 Fuller, and the DeVos Place will continue to the Vaccinate West Michigan site will continue. And we are sending some of our staff down to the DeVos place to support that work. It's a collaborative between the health department, Spectrum, Mercy. And so that place will continue, and 700 Fuller will continue. And we also are hoping that there will be multiple other smaller sites around the community to, especially to service those people that for one reason or another don't want to go down to DeVos place.
Okay, great, thank you. Next one we have, I said, kind of bumped back and forth here. We'll do this one first. Is the second dose of Moderna made of the same materials as the first dose?
It is.
Yep, same. Next one we have at the top is, if I'm vaccinated and so is one other person, can we be around each other without masks?
So this is a tricky one to answer. So for the two people who are involved, you're both very protected against getting symptomatic COVID. So both of you will be safe. Most likely, there's very low chance that either of you would get very sick with COVID. However, we know that there are variants out there. And so if either of these people have been around other people and potentially have asymptomatic disease with a variant, you could pass that to the other person, then pass that to others in your circle. So that is the potential that we have to worry about right now. And I saw a question there that we can't really return to normal in-person life, so why should I get it? But it's really to protect you right now. And it'd be hard for me to believe that you're going to be, I would guess that you're going to be less infectious to other people. I know we can't say that 100% right now, but that's how most vaccines work. And so I would guess that would happen as well. Is that accurate, Karla? I want to make sure that I'm not saying something that I shouldn't say. Okay.
No, you're good.
Okay, if we take an anti-inflammatory medication, should we stop taking it prior to the COVID shot?
I would talk to your doctor about that one. Depends what you're taking and why you're taking it.
Okay. Will this presentation be made public? It's one of the best I've seen. The disinformation videos are out there, and I'd rather send them a link to this video to combat it. The answer is yes. As soon as this is done, we will certainly share the link out to the recording that we're making of this video, and we can share it with other people. Let's see, another one bumped up there. Where can we find the correct list of all the ingredients for each? I would assume vaccine online. So is there
CDC.
like a...
Oh, go ahead, Karla.
Yeah, CDC has the listing of the ingredients on there.
And that's probably just a quick search, like CDC ingredients, COVID. Oh, wait, I'll do it even better. Moderna. Oh, there it is. Right like that. Okay. Oh, they even have what's a EUA? Let me see.
So that's emergency use
Okay.
authorization, yes.
Okay.
And so there is, I think it's probably actually in the EUA. It's in there.
So I guessed right.
And
okay.
Yeah, you did. Let's see here.
It might be in the FAQs.
Yeah, I think it's in the FAQs. It's been a while since they've changed things around on the website. So
Okay.
it's under the additional information piece. And
Okay.
also there's a fact sheet and additional information up there as well.
All right. I'll just put that in the chat and folks can go and click that link and find that, and probably also for the Pfizer vaccine and any other ones from Johnson & Johnson that pop up eventually. Okay. So I think Dr. Bora, you addressed this. So even if we get the vaccine, we can't return to normal in-person life. So
if your older loved ones are vaccinated, you can feel much more reassured about being around them.
okay. Next one. Any concerns about extra aluminum in your body? Or adding extra aluminum?
I don't believe
in your
there's
body?
aluminum in these vaccines.
No.
There are no preservatives in these either.
Okay.
No.
Question about, does the current vaccine help against new variants of the COVID?
They are effective. Go ahead, Karla.
Yeah. So we've been kind of spoiled by these mRNA vaccines, honestly, hearing the effectiveness ranging around 95%. So they are doing studies currently right now to see if they are effective against the new variants. And we're hearing in some cases that potentially, looking specifically at the South African variant, that potentially that it could drop the effectiveness of the vaccines, possibly even down to 50%. But as Dr. Bora said, thinking about like flu vaccines, a lot of times those range between 40 and 60%. And so that's well within the range of other vaccines that we do have. So again, some protection is better than no protection as well.
And they're able to make boosters to really compensate for that.
Okay, and are there groups of people who the vaccine is not recommended for?
At this point, it's only studied in people 16 and above for one kind and 18 and older in those. So at this point, children are still being studied, so they're not quite able to get vaccinated right now.
Okay, I think I saw what this one popped up, but an hour ago, at the very beginning, I have a respiratory allergy to propylene glycol. Is there any commonality between propylene glycol and polyethylene glycol that should be of concern with me receiving the vaccine?
I don't know that answer. A pharmacist may know, but I personally don't know that answer. An allergist may also know, but I'm sorry, I don't know that.
This one, once we have an appointment, how will we know which version we will get?
We can't really say at this point which version you'll get. Every Friday, we find out how much vaccine is allocated to each system the following week, and we don't know how much of each kind we will get. So there's really no way to predict that. We do know, though, you should get your second dose should be the same as your first dose. So if you get Moderna to begin with, you need to get Moderna the second time. And one question we get a lot is that it is okay to wait up to 6 weeks to get your second dose between first and second doses. Okay. Ideally, is close to 21 days after your Pfizer and 28 days after Moderna. But if it needs to get lengthened because of appointment scheduling or something else, that is still okay. It's still going to be effective.
Well, I know I'm going to be in the basement of the health department this Friday, so. What is the difference between Pfizer and Moderna vaccines?
So overall, they utilize the same exact technology, just different manufacturers. Their mRNA might be slightly different, but they're both coding for spike protein. So it's honestly the same technology, but just slightly different RNA molecules.
Okay, well, that is all the questions that we had posted and things. So we're coming up close to the end of the meeting here. One of the things that again, we'll just emphasize here is once we have this recording, we'll post this out to the folks that have registered and to the rest of our staff through our communications department. So for each of you, Joann, Dr. Bora, Dr. Black, or maybe we'll do Dr. Black first, then Dr. Bora, and then Joann is the last words there. Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you for having me on today. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate everything all the teachers and employees of the schools are doing. Again, I mean, we really appreciate everything. Thank you so much.
Okay. Dr. Bora?
Yeah, no, we know how hard teachers have been working. It's been exhausting. I'm so impressed with my kids' teachers and all the teachers that are, working super hard to teach, to keep school safe, to take care of students emotionally and help them learn. It's just impressive what you've all done. So we are grateful for all the flexibility that you've shown and all the changes that you've made. And we're excited for you to all get the vaccine and talk to others about it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And
Joann.
Finally, I would just like to say that many bad things have come out of this COVID pandemic. Many really life-changing things. It's been a very, very difficult past year, but some good things have come out of it too. And one of the good things that has come out of it is I think that the schools appreciate public health more than ever, and public health appreciates the schools more than ever. You are important to the well-being of our community. Sometimes it hasn't seemed like this, but I, as the liaison to the schools, have been, we really value getting children educated. And we are as concerned about the welfare of the children and their educational needs as we are about the public health in the broader community. So be assured, we are your partner. We are here to give you accurate and reliable and hopefully unbiased information so that you can make a really wise choice for you and your families. And as you move forward, please reach out to us as a resource, because we want to work with you. We have so many common goals. We care about you as school staff, and we care about the children that you educate. So anything we can do to help keep you healthy and keep our schools open and functioning well, and that's what we're all about.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Joann.
And to our interim superintendent, Ron Kaler, last words, and then we'll close this up. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Joann. Thank you, Doctors Bora and Dr. Black. We very much appreciate this opportunity. Obviously, the report that we've received from our participants here today is that they really believe this is very helpful. I can't say enough about the partnership we forged throughout this most unfortunate incident. And again, very much appreciate all that you've done to help our schools throughout this. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll make the recording available once we get it processed. Thanks. Good day.
Bye-bye.